Something, 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 Lord of the Rings, blah, blah, blah. F you, Bucky Irving. Welcome in once again to the dungeon of the Doctors of Doom, where I'm not your host for sure, but this man is. Give it up for Mitch Playoff Bound Black, ladies and gentlemen. And I am just some random guy who happens to talk. I am Alex the Spectator Sparks, because man, did my coaching cost me this week. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. I'm not going to enjoy blasting myself for the next hour, but here we go. Mitch, say hello.
Hello, cue all the applauses and the cheering sounds, and yay, Team Avengers, yay.
Yeah, Team Avengers in the playoffs. You'll notice our producer, once again, not here. He is also in the playoffs, Team Phoenix. The only guy letting down the squad is me. All I had to do was win a single game in the last 3 weeks. In fact, that's not even true. I just needed to tie a single game in the last 3 weeks, and I couldn't even do that right. And so here I am. Positive record on the season. I mean, can't complain about that, but man, dropping the ball at the finish line, that was rough end of the season for the Sharks. For context, I'm in 4 fantasy football leagues. 3 of them are money leagues. This is the only one that didn't make the playoffs, and it's the only one that's not a money league. It's also the only one I care about. So, man, this is tough. I'd trade all 3 of those other playoff berths for one here. But yeah, Mitch, unless you have some gloating you'd like to do, we'll get right into the scores. I'll let you gloat a little bit. Go ahead and get some gloating in. You got like 30 seconds to say whatever you want and gloat, and then we'll do the breakdown.
I'm just happy I couldn't let Vinny finish number one in points for. That's the only gloating I'll do.
That's true. You are the top dog, best record, best points. All right, moving in then, and we start as we always do with my pain and torment. Actually, no. We'll go backwards this week. We'll start with the Avengers because holy crap, did the Avengers, Austin, poor Austin. We've talked about how unlucky he is. He finally has a decent week, as we did. For those who listened to the podcast last week, that the amount of points necessary to win the majority of the time, the magic number is more like 80, not 90. If you score in the 80s, you usually win. Austin scores 86, and he gets doubled up by the Avengers. I mean, Josh Allen, record day, 3 rushing and 3 passing TDs. Obviously, those 3 rushing TDs killed me. They're all 1-yarders, and guess who has the starting running back for the Buffalo Bills? This guy. But yeah, if you had told me, Mitch, that Saquon Barkley would only have 14 points, and I say only, like, I know that's weird to say, but he didn't score a touchdown, right? If Saquon
Right.
only had 40 points, but I said you're going to drop a buck 59, would you have believed me?
Definitely not. I mean, the funniest part was Austin texted me. I think his text was 57 points would have beaten my whole team most weeks of this year.
Yeah,
If I
that's true.
just had Josh Allen. So it's like a little ridiculous. I will admit though, I love my Sunday afternoon naps, and I usually fall asleep right in the middle of that afternoon games, and I woke up and I saw the highlight and I just started laughing really hard. 57 is just ridiculous. There's nothing else to be said. I could have started anyone else. I could have been the worst coach in the world and been fine.
Yeah, you could have started Allen and Addison and benched the rest of your team and won 88 to 86. So
Yeah, that's
that's how much they
insane.
popped off. I mean, honestly, just as surprising, if not more so, than Josh Allen's is Addison, because I mean, 133 yards, 3 touches. I mean, that's a huge game out of a wide receiver too. Especially a guy that, like,
Well,
if you look, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Addison. He's a good player, but like, if you look, he's got a lot of games this season where he's not in double-digit fantasy points, including
right.
last week. You know what I mean? And then this week he drops 31. So
Yeah, I will say though, I forget, hold on. He was an average. I think he was a lot higher up. Let me see here, because he didn't play the whole first month of the season. So he's 1/10 or something, like 10th or 11th. So he's still a top 12 wide receiver based on average. Just he didn't have a good start. And I'll say more just like I think Vinny had him first and Miles had him. They both picked him up and dropped him. And then my other good player is Chris Brown. And those two, like I don't really care about waivers, but when sorry, Chase Brown. I keep calling him Chris Brown. But when Austin had to drop Chase Brown because his team was so injured at the beginning, and I like salivated, and Zach Moss was still running, so it wasn't like a big deal. He was still a starter. And then Vinny or Miles both picked up and dropped Jordan Addison, and I was so upset I didn't get a waiver on Jordan Addison. So I've been wanting Addison since like week 2 or 3, but actually like week 4, but I just never could get him. So I'm just saying like this year. Some coaching moves help and some don't, and then just having to pick the right weeks when to start them. This is my first week. I think I've picked the right week starting all the players. Because if you scroll to my bench, there's actually not more points on my bench than my starting for like 1 week
Yeah, I already
finally.
checked that, and yeah. I mean, Chase Brown is honestly he's been the steal of the century, and I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, Austin had to make that decision. I feel bad for Austin every time he
Right.
hears this conversation, but if you look, so keep in mind this is your RB2, right? Saquon's your one.
Yeah.
So your RB2 outside the first 3 weeks, which are the weeks that you didn't have him, right? This is what prompted Austin to drop him. Since then, he has had 1 week with 4 points. Every other week has been double digits. There was one with 9, but as RB2, I'm still taking 9 as a W. So like since you've picked him up, he has been RB1 caliber other than 1 week, which is
Right. So Zach Moss didn't get hurt until like he was getting those 12 points like week 5 and 6 was Zach Moss
yeah.
still there. Moss
Moss
didn't
was
get
going
hurt till
IR
like
like
week
week
7.
9, right? So
Yeah, something like that, something later.
yeah.
So the only thing I will say to Austin is like it's just tough. Like this happened to me. This would have screwed my draft, but saved my draft. Right in front of me, Vinny, one pick in front of me took Montgomery, and then Austin. I went with Zach Moss. I was always going to back him up with Chase Brown, but Austin did the smart thing and went like a round and a half early on Chase Brown, and I didn't have an opportunity at him. So those two picks almost screwed me on the year. But that's just the way it goes when you draft with other good managers. You don't know when a lot of these guys are going to go a round or two early on some guys because they like them. But yeah, if I knew back in hindsight, I would have gone Chase Brown like back to back with Zach Moss instead of waiting and losing him. That almost did cost me. All right,
Oh,
anyways.
and
Sorry, Austin.
it's funny because remember in the draft, like I told you this, I had Moss higher on my big board than Singletary, but when it came time to pick, I was so worried about the committee with Chase that I picked Singletary. And the irony is, I was right to not take Moss, but I was so wrong to not just take the other Bengals running back.
See,
I mean, it
I
still
was
worked
worried,
out for me
yeah.
because I ended up getting Tracy when Singletary got hurt, and Tracy's been great. So like, it still worked out fine for me. But like, it's hilarious
Right.
that like I tormented myself over do I take Moss here, and then going against my own big board in the moment to take Singletary because I wanted the guy, and it's like Moss would have been the worst possible pick as opposed to the best.
See, that's just the risk with like I wasn't as smart as either you or Austin. You and Austin definitely knew Chase Brown over Moss. I figured if you look at all the other running backs that got paid this off before the season started, like all the running backs, if a team decided to pay for the running back, that running back's done well this year. You can go across the board, Mixon, Barkley, everyone,
Well,
Derrick Henry,
and
everyone.
the reason for that is they got paid on a new team. I think is the big
Right.
deal, which
So Zach Moss,
usually means they went to a team that they wanted to go to and that wanted them. When you're changing
right.
teams and getting big money, that means that team wants you and has a plan for you. Whereas
So
if you
what's
get
the
big money
answer
from
then?
if you get big money from the team you're already on, that's just like okay, we're rewarding a guy that the fans like. For example, if the Giants had re-signed Barkley, it would have been because it sells jerseys. They even said that in that
For
uh,
sure.
Hard Knocks, right?
Clip,
So
yeah.
like the fact that these running backs got money from other teams meant those other teams and that coaching staff are like, we want that guy. We can do something with him, and I think that's what's paid off so well. So it's surprising that Moss he did so well last year as a Colt, and then the Bengals were like, hey, we can let Mixon go. We want that guy, and then that just didn't work out at all.
See, that's what I'm wondering now, as opposed to they maybe didn't want Mixon to go, and now Moss was more of a, oh, we have to have some because we lost Mixon. Because you and Austin were correct. Chase Brown was going to take over. I didn't think that was going to happen for any of the paid running backs. So that was Zach Moss' job to lose. But no, Chase Brown won that over before Zach Moss got hurt.
When
So now that's what I was trying to say is I'm wondering if that was more of like, no, we want Mixon, but they couldn't afford Mixon. So it was like a plan B, let's go get Moss. So
Yeah,
the point of his,
I think the age had a lot to do with it, right? Mixon was going to have a high price tag and a high age, and I think that's what
Yeah.
the issue was. But let's
And they
kind
knew they
of
had someone good like Brown. And then last thing I'll say is I knew you guys were smarter, but I knew I had always intended on just doubling up, so I didn't have to be smart. It's just whichever one worked out, I was going to do that one. But Austin almost ruined that for me. Go on.
all right. Sorry, we got to speed run this a little bit because like I got to leave in about 20 minutes. So
Oh, we're good.
one thing I will say as far as Austin's luck, look at Travis Kelsey this season. Only 2 weeks
Yeah,
with
that's a
double-digit
bonus.
fantasy points from a tight end one that you're taking in the first or second round. That's rough. I mean, Travis Kelsey had 2 touchdowns this season. That's it in fantasy. That's insane. So yeah, moving on. Not a lot of playoff implications here. Had Cameron won, there could have been some discussion if my dad hadn't won. Unfortunately, Dad did win, which once again makes it where Cameron is one of the only people ever to go. Oh no, he would have had to go 9. Yeah, never mind. That didn't apply. That was what we were talking about. If he got 9 wins, he would have been the only one one of the only people ever to go 9 wins and still not make the playoffs. Miles' team cooking at the end, which is the right time to be on. Just unfortunately, he was already eliminated. I think he's won 3 in a row. I believe he shredded through his division here, but he was just too far out of it. The only thing really notable here, they all made the right start-sit decisions other than Dowdle over Gibbs, though you're starting Gibbs every time there. But I will say Dowdle has been a surprising boost. I think he's been like RB5 since he finally started getting carries over the last few weeks, which is kind of interesting. And then waiver wire move here by Cam McCormick. The Raiders seem to have good production from their running backs, as bad as their team is, if you can ever guess which one they're going to start that week. Because some weeks it's Madison, some weeks it's Zamir Wright. This week it was Sincere McCormick. Who knows who it'll be next week? One week that Luis had him, it was Abdullah. So the Raiders seem to always have a running back that produces. We just don't know who it's going to be. But not a lot to talk about here. Cam had some key guys on buys.
A chance at the playoffs, yeah.
And that cost him. But we're going to see, even had he won, it wouldn't have mattered. But it mattered going into the week because we didn't know, but it ended up not mattering. And even though they both had wideouts that put up goose eggs, Miles got the dub. Anything you want to talk about on this one?
Nope, that's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, Jets D, abysmal. Great start there. 0 points. Anyway, all right, moving on. The Sparkplugs heard they need to turn it back on for playoff time, and turn it back on they did, dropping $1.20. This is back where they used to be early on in the season. They'd kind of fallen off, but Dad finally decided to start Rachaad White. Another thing that's just brutal to me, Bucky Irving gets hurt and goes out, so Rachaad White becomes the starter again, something he hadn't been in weeks. And look what he did. Also, Dad keeps starting Algier, but this time he had to because Robinson was on a bye, and Algier gets a touch. So just everything clicked. Baker played well. Cup played well. Jefferson finally started playing like Jefferson again. The only standard bad point scorer here was Kmet, which is kind of what Cole Kmet does. But yeah, Dad's team popped off. Chris played well. We all said that Chris' team was going to be a dangerous one. I mean, here, once again, the waiver wire, running back from San Francisco, whoever their starter is going to be fantasy viable. I guess that's the interesting question from this game, Mitch. Do you pick up Patrick this week and start him? The fourth stringer for the Niners, assuming Dorendo doesn't play?
No, I have two. I'm comfortable with my running backs, but maybe I think Luis is making that decision when we go to Luis's team. I think he just made the decision on a different running back. I think he went Tank Bigsby. He could have gone Taylor Bigsby, or there was one other I was looking at, and I think he went Bigsby. But just to Nolan's team real quick, is there any world he has a debate over his running back too? Because he has 34 points that he's going to be substituting to his bench this week between his two running backs. Obviously, King Henry needs to go in. That's not debatable. So is there a world where he's debating his second starting running back between these three guys, Robinson Jr., White, and Algier? Or am I just delusional right now?
If Bucky Irving isn't going to play or is going into the week with as many injuries as he went into this week, which I should have made that read better, I would start White. Whoever the RB1 for the Buccaneers is scores fantasy points, period. Just based purely on volume, right? Two reasons. One is volume, and two, they get a lot of receiving stuff. I mean, as you can see, a receiving touchdown. So if we know it ahead of time, Bucky Irving's not going to play, I think you have to start Rachaad White. If Bucky Irving is going to play and he's like doesn't have an injury designation, because like I started him because he had an injury designation, but they took it away the day before the game. I guess if they take it away. If they take it away like earlier in the week, like if there's no injury designation that gets removed on Thursday and there's a couple of days, then I'm probably staying away from White because Irving's going to be the starter again. But if White's going to be the guy, then you go with White and Henry and you set it and forget it. If he's going to split, I think I would go with Robinson just because Robinson's the guy.
Safer. Yeah, I agree with all that. The only thing is like, so there's a world where he would start White and Baker next week.
I think
That's
so.
tough, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, a lot of White's production over the last few weeks has been receiving production. Once Bucky became the primary ball carrier, White's role was in the passing game. So if Baker throws a TD, there's a good chance at least one of them goes to White, as you saw here, right? Yeah. So yeah, I have no problem with that. I think there's teams with good enough offense. It's kind of like, if you had Lamar and Derrick Henry, you'd start them both. No, I'm not saying that Baker and Rachaad White are those two guys, but you get what I'm saying? Like, this is a high-powered offense that scores a lot of points. If you have the quarterback and the RB1, like the uncontested RB1, assuming Bucky doesn't play, then I'm making that start. All right.
Yeah, I was high on Godwin. And I took Godwin at the beginning of the year, but my one of my biggest mistakes was not being high enough on the Bucks fantasy players, and you and your dad capitalized on that. We can move on.
Yeah, but mine was just a lug for Mike Evans, I think. But yeah, we'll get to mine. Mine ended up costing me everything, so we'll see that here shortly. Um, Chris played well. A couple of underperformers here. These guys are usually a little higher up, but still 93 points, solid week. But just dad was in a well, it wasn't must win, but he needed to win if Cameron won, and so he didn't want to risk it. He got the dub. He's in the playoffs, and even though he's got the second best record, he is the wild card. So you have to play him for the third time this season. So that's going to be an exciting matchup. Moving on here, the guy who didn't bother to show up. I don't even know why we're going to talk about his team, but I guess we will. Vinny, his team popped off. Other than AJ Brown, for those who watch news, there's some drama about Brown and Hurts not on the same page. Maybe they're not friends. The Eagles can't pass the ball, but it doesn't matter. They haven't thrown for like 200 yards in weeks. He had 108 yards passing this week, but from a fantasy standpoint, who cares? They got the points, right? Everything went right for Vinny here. Judy has been an absolute steal off waivers ever since Tillman went down. So yeah, not a lot to say here. Break, we talked about it. He was going to be missing a lot of his star players. Taylor, Collins, Sutton, Jackson. All four of those guys are guys I'm starting, and they're all on a bye. And his replacements got 0, 9, 8, 27. Not bad for golf by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, just missing too many bullets in the gun there for Break. And even if he had them all, it would have been tough because Vinny put up a big score. Once again, Jacobs has been the absolute steal with that trade that he made to get Jacobs early on this season. Anything to say about this one?
No, it is interesting. Hurts as it struggles because I'm thinking about starting the Steelers next week. But yeah, it's very interesting. Uh, the Judy's picked up the slack basically. But yeah, we'll see how it goes in the playoffs. Vinny's breakdown is insanely good, but we can move on.
Let's move to two of the teams who have been absolute all-stars for the last 3 weeks, but unfortunately they were already mathematically eliminated. Both Chaos and Serial Killers have been causing chaos and killing people, mainly me, over the last 3 weeks. They've both popped off here. Caleb Williams still sucks. As you can see, when he's not playing me, he drops back to himself. But Bijan was a beast. Mooney was a beast, even without a touchdown. Puka Nakua, woo, Puka. Yeah, so Sylvie popped off, but unfortunately, as good as her team played, when you look over here, Sam Darnold gets absolutely no respect in any league that I'm in, but all he does is ball. This guy's getting himself paid. I think the big question is going to be who's going to pay him. Because
The Jets.
yeah, that's the thing, right? So like the whole thing is the whole thing is part of the reason that the Vikings let Kirk walk is because they didn't want to pay him, right? And so now with Darnold,
They're
it's
not
like
going to pay Darnold. They're not going to pay Darnold.
well, that's the thing. Like, do you pay? But like, how deep of a playoff run does he have to make before they pay him, or do they?
Oh,
Let him
they have
walk?
to go to the. No, they're going to let him go unless they go to a Super Bowl with him. I don't think there's any reality where the Vikings could beat the Eagles or the Lions. So he's pretty much. I mean, unless he beats the Lions or the Eagles and goes to the Super Bowl, I don't think there's because the whole point of why you draft what's his name, the backup. Oh my gosh, is because then he's stuck to the contract rookie pay scheme, and that's why they let Cousins go. You can't have. There's no point in like. They're not going to trade that guy because you're not going to get the same value for what you used your value pick, like 11th overall for him. So it's like it's wild to me. He's good as gone, and that's why they even signed what's his name from the Giants because I think they're going to roll with him as a backup next year. Yeah, no, Darnold's pretty much good as gone.
Yeah, I'm just curious where he's going to go. And you look credit to Matt, even though he's eliminated. The dude is a waiver wire wizard. Gets Charbonnet off waivers when Walker's not going to play. Gets 30 points out of him. Chubb Hub over here has been one of the top running backs in football this season. The guy that Vinny rostered for all of 12 weeks played a game and a half before going out with another ACL tear. So Hubbard's the guy again. He's been a baller. And then Jonnu Smith. I'm still kicking myself about this one. I mentioned before I picked him up.
Yeah, that's the one
I picked him up in every league before he started popping off, except for this one, and it cost me because there have been multiple weeks that I would have won had I started him instead of Kate Otten. But props to Matt. I mean, master stroke on the waivers there. And Darnold, he didn't draft Darnold either, right? So like this is a waiver wire pickup too. So I think of his starting lineup, I think St. Brown and Higgins are the guys that he drafted. Maybe the Niners D or kicker. But yeah, mad props to him. And part of that's because he had to. He took Pacheco in the first round, which all of us would have had in that position, and Pacheco hasn't really played. So props to Matt on that.
He took Pacheco in the second, I think. I think Amon-St. Brown was his first pick. But yeah, the thing is, like, Matt, I joke with him all the time. I was like, Pacheco getting hurt was the greatest thing for your team. You just had some bad losses early. I mean, him and I tied at 97-97, and Nolan and him tied. Nolan and I are both playoff teams, so he tied two playoff teams. If he could just get a win against one of the other teams that he has five losses against, his season could have been different. He did draft 49ers, but yeah, he played the waivers early on. That's a legit strat. Like, if you can lose a couple games early, you get the top guys who are gonna, and like Hubbard is a lifesaver. So I mean, well done. And the fact that Darnold was available, I think Luis picked up Darnold and dropped him, and then he's still available like week 8 or 9 is just a little ridiculous in my opinion. But yeah, I agree with you. Darnold shouldn't have been a free agent after like week 2 or 3, but because of his name, no one wanted to pick
Yeah,
him
he's
up.
bounced around a lot of teams just because of the name alone. All right. And then the one that I've been dreading, the Sharks take the loss to Revis and Butthead, knocking me out of the playoffs because it came down to points for and he had more points. I got let down by my running backs, and the biggest one is this decision here. I waffled back and forth about this. I ended up going with Irving over Aaron Jones, who had been starting all year. Jones got 14, Irving got 1. The difference is 13 fantasy points, which would have been a tie. Had we tied, I would have had the better record overall because I would have been 8-5-1. He would have been 7-6-1. So I would have made the playoffs. So I cost myself the playoffs there. Obviously, I was up against Jamar Chase, who's a baller, but it doesn't matter. It's not like his team popped off. It was just rough because, I mean, going into even going into Monday night, like, they gave me hope, which is the worst thing. As an Auburn Tiger fan and a Las Vegas Raider fan, they do that to you. They give you hope that, hey, you might have a chance. And then, of course, you don't. Going into Monday Night Football, it came down to Chase versus Lamb, which could have been an epic matchup, right? Like, oh, man, two of the top wide receivers going at it. Monday Night Football to decide who makes the playoffs. The difference was my guy didn't have Dak. First drive of the game, they go down to Lamb, gets a touchdown. I was like, oh, there's a chance. I'm up by 8. This is huge. Chase answers right back with a touchdown on the very next drive for the Bengals. It goes back and forth. At halftime, we're tied. We're like still tied like at halftime. It's like, oh, anything could happen. He's made up 2 points on me, but anything can happen. And then the second half happened, and I think Lamb got no points. Chase got another 14 or whatever it was. And then it became a roller coaster for a different reason, because then when Chase got that 40-yard touchdown to ice the game, it put him up 14 points, which meant my coaching blunder wasn't the reason I lost, and it made me feel so much better. And then with like 2 plays left, CeeDee Lamb got a 12-yard catch that got him enough fantasy points that made it where my coaching blunder did cost me. So, yeah, and I mean, nothing but props to Luis. He played well. He also, had a decision he could have made down here on the bench that would have net him a few more points too. So, I'm not knocking Luis. He's deserving. I've been saying for weeks now, I think his team's one of the scarier ones. It just sucks. Yeah, that's all I got.
The interesting part for me is, yeah, once Dak went down, it was a different story I think for your team. That was pretty much it, because it was more of the effect on Lamb for sure than anything else. It would be like if Burrow goes down, Chase wouldn't be able to be the same and close to the same player. So it's like Lamb is up there with the Jamar Chases and the Justin Jeffersons of the world. It's just this year he lost his QB.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
don't
I
know.
think,
I don't know. I don't remember exactly which week Dak went down, but I do know Dak played in this game. So the 26-point game
yeah,
Dak played. So let's look at all the games after that. Now, some of these might have been with Dak, but since that game, he's only had 2 games with double-digit fantasy points. And this is my first round pick, not just my wide receiver one, my first round pick. And we said a lot. You can't win your league in the first round, but you can lose it. Now, I don't think that's why I lost, because he got me 15 points this week, so I can't blame him for this week. I blame Bucky Irving. But I will defend my decision a little bit. So if you look at Bucky Irving's stat lines, so over the past 3 weeks prior to this week, 14, 20, 24, he was on the uptick. He was playing well. He had taken over as the starter, including last week where he got 25 carries to, I think, the 8 of Rachaad White. He was the starter in a high-powered fantasy offense. I think it was worth starting him, because when you look at Aaron Jones the last few weeks, and this is why I made this decision ultimately, 6, 16, 3 were his last 3 weeks. If we're just looking at those 3. And then before that, 9, 7, 8. Like, Aaron Jones hadn't had the production that I'd wanted for a few weeks. And the most recent week, he had 5 carries to the 25 carries of Bucky Irving. So like I don't think it was necessarily the wrong decision. Now, in hindsight, it was a terrible decision, right? But I don't know that it was the wrong call at the time. It blew up in my face for sure. It also, you mentioned having multiple bucks. I mean, I was kind of in a situation where I was starting Irving and Otten and Evans, so I did have 3 Buccaneers, which is a little rough. And it sucks because I think Baker threw 3 TDs. Just none of them were to any of my guys.
Yeah. So and then also, I think did you say like the block punt, right? The block punt that the Bengals got, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
the,
yeah,
the Cowboys. The
yeah.
Cowboys blocked the punt, and then the Bengals got the first down off of it. That could have been huge for your fantasy outcome too. That's when was watching the TV and my heart felt for you because it was like the Cowboys were getting the ball back. I think you were either down a point or two in the game or up a point or two, and then Chase ends up scoring the touchdown from recovering on a blocked punt because it went past the line of scrimmage. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like the
Yeah.
blocked punt. Yeah, that was wild. After that play, I was like, oh no, because it was so much fun to watch the first half. Like you guys are like interchanging points and all that stuff. And then it
Yeah, I
was
mean,
just,
you got,
oh,
but I mean, when James Cook averages 13 fantasy points a game and you get 2 out of him, that's
yep,
a tough go. Um,
yep,
yeah, that's really all it comes down to. I got 2 out of him, and then Bucky Irving averages 10 a game, and that's with him not being the starter the first half of the season. So it's actually higher once he became the starter. And I got 1 out of him because he left the game injured super early, and we saw how many points Rashad White put up once he became the RB1 with Irving out. So yeah, rough day at the office for me. Um, yeah, so let's look at the overall standings at the end of the season here. Again, I am sorry this episode's a little rushed, but I've got some stuff going on and Vinny's not here. So overall standings, our division looks kind of insane. Let's sort it by wins because that'll make more sense. So if you look here, top division 8-6, 8-6 tie goes to division record. He's got the tiebreaker with division record. Had Matt been 8-6 as well, he would have lost the division record. But let's say he was 8-6 because of getting one more division win, then it would have gone to points for. Matt had more points than Luis. So this division ended up being really close. 3 people with positive records. Integrity division, only 2. Cameron at 8-6 gets left out. Vinny at 9-5 gets into the playoffs. We've talked a lot about that all year. This division was very tight. Break, we thought, had one of the best teams collapse towards the end of the season, kind of like I did. A lot of the Sparks collapsed towards the end, honestly. But this whole division very tight. I mean, only one person with a losing record, and even that was 6-8. And then your division had a little more disparity with a couple bottom dwellers and then 2 top heavy teams here. The Spark Plugs tried to choke towards the end of the season, but then finally pulled it together this week with a monster week, and that makes the playoffs exciting. I think of the 4 teams going into the playoffs, 3 of them scored like 120 or more points this week. So that's really
yeah,
exciting.
definitely.
So go ahead.
The other thing too is that integrity division, their points for is just ridiculously better than the other 2 divisions points for. So good on the integrity division this year. And going into the preview, so it's me, Nolan, and Vinny versus Luis. Going into the preview, Vinny is 9-5 against Luis, and I am 10-4 against Nolan. So,
In
and
breakdown, you
then if you
mean?
look at yeah, breakdown. Sorry, I'm 10-4 against Nolan, and Vinny is 9-5 against Luis. And then Vinny and I have like 170 and 160 more points for than the other 2. So I'm just saying this should kind of line up to be a Vinny versus myself Super Bowl. But again, Vinny and I are joking about it all the time. We thought this 2 years ago when we had historical teams, and Sylvie just laid the smack down on both of us. So this is anybody's game. Who knows? If you look at the matchups this week, even though I'm 10-4 against Nolan. Nolan looks like he has a way better matchups. I'm excited to see how this goes down because Luis's team, if you look at the breakdowns against Vinny's team, Luis's team also has like the most out of anyone besides me, the most chance to beat Vinny. I think he is 5-9 was second best or whatever. So it's coming down to, and Nolan's 10-4 was like second best to me. So it's like Vinny and I are playing the teams that was second best we most would have struggled with if we go on breakdowns, which never works out that way. So it's going to be very interesting. And if this ends up being a Nolan Luis Super Bowl, please Nolan, please win, please win. Nolan.
Yeah.
Or
So
even if it ends up to being a Nolan Vinny Super Bowl, please Nolan win. Nolan, if you beat me, please win.
Yeah, if you look at that, no, you heard it here. Mitch wants Nolan to win the Super Bowl. He is rooting against himself this week. Yeah, real quick, let's check out the breakdowns. As you can see, all the green check marks with Team Phoenix here. So clearly, he is the odds-on favorite. That being, and he has the series lead, 14-8. But Luis did beat him the last time they played earlier this year, so it is doable. Looking at the quarterbacks, I think Matthew Stafford is supremely underrated. You and I've talked about this before. He turns it on at the end of the season. That being said, Thursday night's not usually good for offense. At San Francisco is usually not a good thing. That's a difficult matchup. But Philly has a difficult matchup too. Pittsburgh is no slouch when it comes to defense. So this is kind of interesting. I think both quarterbacks have bad matchups. So we'll see how that plays out. When it comes to the running backs, I think Josh Jacobs is going to have a field day against Seattle. So that's going to be tough. And I think Tank, even if Tank is the guy now that gets all the carries, he's not averaging that many yards per carry, whereas David Montgomery and the Lions are just absolutely cruising. And we saw last week that the Bills do not play defense, apparently, this year.
I think this is where Vinny wins the game right here, is the running backs differential.
Yeah, well, but I think there's going to be a differential here just because A.J. Brown has been unhappy and he hasn't played well the last couple of weeks, and Jamar Chase has been an absolute monster. I think, Jerry Jeudy has been a surprise, but I think this is where we could see the scales tip back in Luis's favor. I think Jamar Chase by far is the wide receiver one. He matches up well against anyone, but combine that with A.J. Brown being on kind of a downside at the moment, like if we go to his stats, in the last 4 weeks, he's had one good game, right? So, he's had a pretty bad year, yeah.
Right,
but a lot of that was due to injury. Like he started, really strong. But I'm saying in the last 4 weeks, he's had one good week. There's been that drama in the news for those who follow it about him and Jalen not being on the same page, and then that's just talking heads. I don't know how true that is, but at the end of the day, Jamar Chase has been an absolute monster. A.J. Brown has been struggling. Devontae Adams has played, even though the Jets have been terrible, he has played well the last few weeks. 16-12 in his last two outings. Even here, he didn't get a touchdown, but he's getting a lot of targets, 11, 13, 7. So there's opportunity there. Plus, they are playing Jacksonville, which is, just a fine team. Like they're not great on either side of the ball. So I mean, there's opportunity there. Whereas Jerry Jeudy is playing a much more staunch Chiefs defense, and even though he has been a big surprise, I think this is where a letdown could be. Because if you look at the Jeudy stat line over the last few weeks where he has been amazing, he has these games where he gets a ton of targets and pops off, but he also has games where he only gets a few targets and he has to catch them all to make it happen. So, for example, this last week, he caught all the targets, but it was only 60 yards. If one of those wasn't a touchdown, one of these plays was a 35-yard TD. So that was 9 fantasy points. I know because I had Jameis Winston starting this week. So, which means he would have only had 3 fantasy points other than that one catch. And again, you can't just say that, but I think there's opportunity for him to fall off because he's been the surprise here. So we'll see how that plays out. So I think this is where it can tilt back because I agree with you. The running backs are definitely going Vinny's way. Tight end is definitely going Vinny's way. Kicker, Cammy Fairbairn, as you mentioned in our chat, has been a monster. And Dicker has been terrible other than the week he played me.
Vinny might regret, though, dropping a 15-point kicker on the Kansas City this week for Fairbairn. He's playing with fire on the way he's doing that.
Yeah, he's been playing kicker roulette, but hey, whatever works for him. And then lastly, I got 3 minutes left, so we're going to speed run yours, Mitch. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Both these teams projected to score a ton. Most of the things are in your favor. One thing's in Dad's. When we look at quarterbacks, I'm a big Baker Mayfield guy, but I mean, after what Josh Allen did, how do you not pick him? Also, the Detroit Lions have 0 starters left on defense. Every single one of them is hurt, so they're running out guys that they just signed off the street. So I think Josh Allen could have a field day, especially since Detroit's going to score a lot of points against them. So it's going to be a shootout just like last week. I think even if Mayfield plays well, I think you've got the edge here. When it comes to running back, it's hard to bet against King Henry or Saquon this year. They're both amazing. So I think it's going to come down to RB2. And right now, I think you might have the edge just because of how well Chase Brown has played. But I will say, in the event that Rashad White is the solo guy, Bucky Irving doesn't play, and Dad starts him, I think I give the tip to Dad here. So this could go either way. I think you both have quality running backs on both sides. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, for sure, it's a wash because it's just Henry or Barkley could easily make up for the whatever Chase Brown and Robinson's deficiency of the week is. Yeah. So yeah, I agree.
And I think this is where the scales are going to tip back in Dad's favor. I'm taking Jefferson and Kupp every day of the week. over Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jordan Addison. Even though Addison did have a good game last week, I just think if I have to pick, if I'm just comparing these two receivers and I have to pick one on the Vikings, I'm taking Jefferson, right? And then I'm taking Cook over Smith and Jigba every day of the week.
Oh, I don't have a wide receiver one. Both my wide receiver ones are benched. And yeah, I agree with you. It's just the thing is that I can only hope for is maybe the matchups with the Niners secondary and Chicago secondary. Like if Addison and Jefferson both have bad games, I think Jigba could beat Cup just because of the matchup. But you're right. Yeah, I'd give Nolan definitely. I'd rather have Cup and Jefferson.
Yeah. Tight end here, I think you both would prefer to have other tight ends. So
Yes.
yeah. Kicker, I cannot believe that Justin Tucker is still rostered. You still believe in him even though nobody else does. And all the fantasy experts give him like all the websites predict him to score so many points, and it's like all he does is miss. So yeah.
You don't get points in this league for missing? Dang.
That's true. Well, you also don't lose points. And then defense, Dad has actually complained to me about this. Every week they project the Ravens D to score a ton, and the Ravens D is not going to good this year. I don't understand it. Now, I will say that, up against Philly, that's a tough matchup for your defense at Philly. So, I mean, maybe there's something to be said there. But yeah, obviously, look, the Giants are terrible, so I understand it from that standpoint. But yeah, Dad's talked to me about, like, he drafted the Ravens so highly because they keep getting projected to score a bunch of points, but their defense hasn't been particularly good.
So I'll be really quick on this. This is fun. I mean, just talk about defense, so who cares? But one, there's not a great alternative to the Steelers D. Two, the Steelers are the second or the third best average on the year, and they've had terrible, brutal, like Bengals twice, Ravens. Like it's been top team after top team after top team, and they're still getting over 10 fantasy points a week. So even Washington a week ago, yeah. So the thing is, also with Eagles are really good, don't get me wrong, but they're not statistically putting up a lot of yards. So it's like, and every time Ertz tries to scramble, that counts as a sack defensively. So I'm kind of just rolling the dice that I can put up a good team, a good defense that can get 10 points as opposed to trying to start a worser defense and hope they do better based on matchup. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh, for sure. No, I did the same thing with the
biggest
Vikings all year
concern.
because the Vikings were one of the top defenses, and the reason I kept starting them even with bad matchups was they kept getting points.
Right.
To your point, in the last 9 weeks, the Steelers D have only gotten less than double digits twice, and that was 9, which is still close to double digits, and that was against Cleveland and the Jets. So when they play good teams like the Eagles, they score more points. So if they were playing a bad team, you should be concerned, but they're playing a good team, so you're fine. I'm really sorry, Mitch, but I do got to run.
No, you're good.
Any last thing you want to say before we head out of here?
No, I just want to do the last one for fun for you, Alex, real quick. Alex was 5-0 and his over under was 10.5. What do you think? I said I took the under seeing the Chiefs for 6-1 to start the year, and they finished 5-5 but won the Super Bowl. And Alex replied, "I'm not going to coast like that." And Vinny said right after that, "I have to take the over because Alex got all the hard games out of the way."
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm obviously
We
you're
both
always going
took
to
the
bet on
over
yourself,
10 and a
right?
half.
You could have set my
10 and
over
a
under
half.
at 14 and I would have taken it, right? Like I'm always going to bet on myself, but yeah, that definitely blew up in my face. Yeah, interesting that he went with Tank here as his waiver choice. We'll see how that plays out for Louise. I know there's a lot more we could talk about. I'm very sorry, but I have to run.
No, you're good.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back and record more. We had to record this on a different day, by the way, which is why I'm in such a rush. I do apologize. Recorded on a different day so that Mitch and Vinny could be here. And Mitch was here, but Vinny's not. But hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back to talk about the Super Bowl and all that jazz. And yeah, peace out, everybody.
Hope everyone had a fun season.
Yeah, for sure.